Hi everyone, this is Mayan. In today's workshop, I will go over how to animate in Blender using a rigged model, how to export that animation into Unity, and then how to set up Unity's controller animator system. I will also be attaching it to scripts, just the simple Unity character controller, so that at the end of the workshop, we should be able to have a playable character with an idle animation, a running animation, and a jump animation. All right, so let's get started. So once you have your character created, once it's modeled and rigged in Blender, you want to go to the animation tab. So as soon as you open the animation tab, you'll have your normal scene where you can make changes. You'll have another scene where you essentially get to view it without all of the, normally if you had cameras and lights, and also the rig itself, all of this can add a lot of visual clutter to the actual animation. So this is a nice extra window. The default animator for Blender is the dope sheet, and essentially this is what you would expect out of an animator. However, Blender also has a mode called the action editor. The difference essentially boils down to the action editor separates each animation into its own sort of file. So when you're exporting it and you have three animations, you can separate it into those three specific animations. Whereas the dope sheet is like an overview and it combines everything. The benefit is that you can have multiple moving parts at once. Say in this scene, if you were to have a building in the back that was moving, some gears, some people walking around, the dope sheet would be really helpful for that. So it's probably more beneficial for in Blender animations, but because we are exporting into a game engine, and for game engines we want each piece to be sort of its own thing. That way we can use it more dynamically. We use the action editor for this. Okay, so within the action editor, it's pretty simple. If you are familiar already with how to navigate and move around in Blender, then most of the controls should be familiar to you. The only new things is like inserting keyframes. So let's start with moving the arm. If we wanted to move this arm around, let's first add a keyframe. So you can right click and insert keyframe, or you can use the shortcut, which is I. And there we go, creates a keyframe there. And now if you're to move to 20, and let's say you wanted to move the arm forward, so press G to move forward. Let's move it a little bit here. Let's move it higher as well. Okay. Now you just press I again. And so now you have two keyframes. And so when you press play, it will actually perform the motion, right? And so this is the basic premise of what animation is like. And yeah, so if we wanted to move the arm back, we can either move it again manually, or we can simply just copy the frames, move to frame 40, and then Control C, Control V, and there we go. And so now if you were to see the animation again, the arm reaches forward and goes back. Okay, and just so you know, this may look intimidating because there's a lot of different properties associated with the arm that you could manipulate, but yeah, you don't have to touch everything at the same time. If there is a bar, oh, where did it go? Yeah, so this gray bar, if there is a bar between keyframes, it essentially means that there are no changes in between. So it's just a nice visual indicator to show you that these 2 points are the exact same points. And if you wanted to move every single keyframe, because normally when you select them, they move individually, but if you wanted to move every keyframe within a particular time, you can just click the summary frame, and then that will move everything at the same time. Okay, so another thing about animation is there is an auto keying mode, and so if you click that, it turns red, so it's basically like it's recording. So now, if I were to move to 60, as soon as I make any change, so let's just do that. even the subtlest of changes, right? Like that was hardly noticeable. It creates a new keyframe. And so essentially, auto keyframing is what the name implies. It will insert keyframes every time you make a change rather than having to manually do it. If you are somebody who might forget that you have auto keying on, then sometimes you might be reviewing some of your older animations and then you accidentally move something, and you don't even realize that that change is now permanent because you had auto keying on, right? So if you are that type of person, then maybe auto keying is not so great. If you prefer to do it manually or if you prefer it automated, the choice is up to you. Okay, and so yeah, that's the premise, and I will fast forward through my workflow as I create the 3 animations, and then I'll come back to you when we're ready to export. Okay, now that we have all our animations, let us export. So go to File. Oh wait, so let's select everything. Just make sure you're in object mode. Select everything. Go to File, Export, FBX. Let's call him just Avocado. And he'll be saved to the desktop. So let's limit it to the selected objects just so it doesn't save everything, like including the lights and everything in our scene. Make sure that the object types only includes armature and mesh. For the transform scale, yep. Yeah, so for Unity, make sure that your forward is the -z forward and the y up. Let's go to geometry, make sure apply modifiers is on. And make sure it's only set to only deform bones. The rest should be fine. And then for the animation, just make sure that the animations are baked in. Okay, and let's export. Okay, so now let's import our avocado into our Unity scene. So you just drag and drop the file into the project window, and then you will be able to see all of these components that make up the avocado character. And so here you can see these are the animation clips within Unity. That's what the icon for animations look like. And if we inspect them, yeah, it looks roughly about right. So this is something that's worth mentioning, but because the online model that I got uses a way of rigging in Blender called bendy bones, it's going to cause animation issues. So you notice how the skeleton is not what you typically see when you create rigs and stuff, because this is a feature that's specific to Blender, and Unity does not support it, which means once the animations are imported into Unity, they're going to be a little bit corrupted. So the legs move a little bit weird. Maybe it's more noticeable for the jump, but they don't, the arms and legs are just not bending as much as they would in Blender. See, the movements are very stiff. So that's something that you guys should really just, be aware of. Yeah, it seems like generally everyone is more in favor of using Blender, which is great because Blender is a tool that's rapidly evolving and improving. But there are a lot of features in Blender that can only be used in Blender. So before you spend too much time working with a cool feature in Blender, please double check if it is Unity compatible. Okay, so let's begin. We can just drag the avocado character into our scene. Let's just rotate him so he's facing the camera. Just make it 180. Okay, real quick, I'm just going to set up this character. So right now, everything is selected and highlighted in blue because this is an active prefab. I'm just going to right-click and unpack completely for the prefab. This way I can make changes to it. I'm just going to make some changes specifically to this model. This will not be applicable necessarily to your model, so bear with me. Okay, so I just had to basically move the face, change the parenting so that the face would actually move with the body, but don't worry about it. Okay, so now within the avocado object, so it's the highest sort of object or highest parent, let's add a couple of components. So first we want to add a character controller component. So, I mean, this is essentially what it sounds like. It's a character controller, and you'll see there is a cylinder with a light green outline. That's where the actual character controller is, and that's how that's what's actually colliding with the environment and has physics applied to it and stuff. So you don't want this to be in the ground, otherwise, you know, it'll cause issues. So let's just move it. So you can adjust the radius, the height, and then you can also move the center, which is what we're gonna do to move it up. And as much as possible, we're gonna try to keep it in line with the shape. So really quickly, I'm just going to use my gizmo over here. If I press these specific little icons, it will orient you to a very particular direction. So let's just, I'm gonna press F to focus in on the avocado character. And then if you press the cube, it turns, it switches you into orthographic view. So everything is very flattened, and that way you can have a more precise sort of view on things. The perspective doesn't skew it and make it hard to tell where is where. We'll just keep the radius like that, and we'll increase the height, just lower the center as well so that it's fitting. And it doesn't need to be exact, just it needs to be roughly there. Okay, awesome, perfect. Okay, so we have the character controller there. For the min move distance, set this to 0. When it's set to 0.001, it causes all sorts of weird things, at least with the default Unity character controller script, which is what we're going to be using. So yeah, speaking of which, add component, and let's add a script. Actually, let's just type in controller, and you can go under new script, controller, create and add. Okay, there we go. And it should just start loading up the script, and if it doesn't automatically open for you, just double click the file. You can also just do it here, double click it, and it should open a script editor for you. In the official Unity documentation, there is a sample script that they provide for a character controller. We're just going to copy this and paste it into our script. Just delete everything and then paste. So this is the default. Let's just quickly do a test run and see what it looks like. Oh, hold on, before that. So obviously they call the class example, but so this is very important. Whatever you name your CS file needs to match the class name, because that's essentially what it is. So if these things don't match, the script will just automatically not work. So make sure it does match. It is also case sensitive, so be mindful of that. So let's make a couple of changes to the script. Right now, all of these variables are set to private, which means you can only really view them when you're in script. We would like to make all of these public so you can edit them in the inspector while in your engine instead of having to come to the script. So if you hit Control F, it will search, right? So you type private, and then click the little drop down arrow over here, replace, and then let's go public. And let's just replace next. Don't replace all of them. I actually did miss this one by accident, so I'm just going to change that to public as well. Okay, so it seems like this is causing problems as well. My assumption is that it is trying to make a reference to a component that doesn't exist yet. Long story short, just delete the section. And now if you press play, you'll be able to move your character. Now obviously your character is just moving, but there are no animations. I'm using WASD to move around. If I press spacebar, I'll jump. And so yeah, at least at the very bare minimum, we have a movable character. And we can adjust the values here. If we set this to 5 and the jump height to, I don't know, like 3. Now he moves faster, he jumps higher. Just be aware, since I am in play mode right now, these changes are temporary. So let's just apply those changes again. And actually, I'm just going to keep the jump height at 2. 3 was a lot. Okay, cool. So now you have a movable character. It's playable, but there are no animations whatsoever. So let's work on that. So let's add a component, and let's add the animator component. So it is looking for an animator controller. So let's just go to the project file, right click in the project window, create, go to animation, and then animator controller. And we can just call this avocado animator. Okay, so let's make a reference to that. Drag and drop the avocado animator into the controller. Okay, so now once you have all of that set up, just double click the avocado animator controller and it will open up this new window. So you can see by default there are sort of three states: entry, exit, and any state. So essentially how this works is the animation moves from state to state. As soon as you start the game, it begins with entry and it will automatically move to whatever animation is hooked up as the default state. What any state means is that it does not have to follow a sort of cyclical order or a process. Regardless of what current state you're already at, it will be able to create an animation from there. This sounds confusing, but you'll understand more as we set this up. So what you want to do is you want to right click in the space, go to create state, and create from new blend tree. So now that it is orange, this means that this is the current default state. Let's just rename this to movement. Everything seems good. So now double click movement and it'll open up another layer and you have a blend tree over here. So if you click on that and you will see a motion list. Let's add some motions and add motion field. Add 2 of those. And now click on this circle icon. And now you should be able to see your animations that have imported along with your Blender file. Obviously these are not named great, but you will want to look for the idle animation and then your walk animation. And by default, the threshold for the idle should be 0 and the walk should be 1. If that's not the case, you can turn off automated thresholds and just set your thresholds by yourself. But for now, we'll leave it at that because this is actually correct. And so now you can just quickly see, like, as you move the blend, the highlights are the changes. And so you're essentially creating a transition between the idle and walk animation, which is controlled by a specific parameter. And we'll be able to control this parameter with script, and that's how we essentially create the transition from being idle to walking. So speaking of parameters, right now we're under Layers tab. Move over to Parameters. And by default, there will be a blend parameter. Just double click it and rename it. We'll call this velocity to represent the player's movement speed. And yeah, it's all set up, so that's good. So now let's go back to the base layer. Let's create a new state, and we'll just create an empty one. And for this, we'll call it jump. Click the circle with the dot in the middle and find your jump animation. Okay. Oh, actually, also really quickly, I forgot to do this earlier, but for your walking and idle animation, click on it, go edit, and then make sure that they're looping, because right now it will only play the walk animation and then sort of stop. Like the preview loops, but it's not actually looping. So make sure that loop time, loop pose are both on, and then apply your changes. If you don't hit apply, it won't save your change. So that was for the walk, and let's do the same thing for the idle. Okay, there we go. So now those two animations are looping. Awesome. So we have the jump animation here. Let's click on any state, right click, make a transition, and then hit jump. And then from jump, make a transition and go to movement. So essentially what this means is that by default, you start at entry and then you'll go into movement. And movement by itself controls both idle and walking. So when you're not moving, so when your system does not detect any velocity, you'll remain doing the idle animation. That's what's playing. The second that any velocity is detected, it will transition into the walking animation. And that's essentially your main behaviors. However, in any state, regardless of whether you're idle or walking at that time, if you jump, you will play the jump animation. And because this doesn't loop, once the jump animation ends, it will automatically move back into either idle or movement, or walking based on what your velocity is. So that's essentially the logic behind the setup. If it's confusing, that's okay. It takes time to sort of get the hang of it, but it's pretty self-explanatory, especially with the arrows sort of visually guiding where the states are moving towards. So within parameters, let's add one more, and we'll add a trigger. And for this trigger, we'll call it jump trigger. And this is what's going to be used in the code to trigger whether we should play the jump animation or not. So you want to click on the triangle arrow in between any state and jump. And over here, you will see there are some conditions. Let's add to this list, and let's set it to jump trigger. So essentially, you're just giving it the logic. So if it detects that jump trigger was activated, then it will automatically switch to this state. Okay, let's see. All the other parameters seem to be fine. Yeah, okay, awesome. Okay, so this is the setup for the animator. Now we'll have to get back into the script. Okay, so now that we're here at the script, we're gonna have to make a couple of changes. So first, we need a reference to the animator component that we just added. For those of you who don't remember, this is the animator component. We need to be able to reference this component in the script itself. So to do that, under your variables, let's just add another one. Let's go private animator. So that's the type of variable. And then C animator. And that's just a name for a character animator. You can call this name, you can call whatever, and it will function the same. Let's do a start. And within your start, do C animator equals get component animator. So what this does is it, as soon as the script is started, it will try to look for an animator controller and then assign it to this variable name. Okay, so now in the update, we can just insert a couple of lines over here and go float movement speed. So this is so float is a type of variable. It just represents any decimal value, and movement speed is just the name of the variable, equals move dot magnitude. Okay, so in order to set it up with the animator, we want to do C animator dot set float velocity, which was the name of the variable that we gave it earlier, and then movement speed. Okay, so those two are fine. What those two do is set up this velocity variable to essentially respond to your movement. So normally the velocity variable sort of is just static. It doesn't really do anything, but now it will respond to you actually moving your character. Oh, and it looks like there is an issue. Can I use variable move before it is declared? Oh, right, so this is the problem. So move is the name of a variable, but it appears before when the variable name has actually been declared, so that causes issues. So you have to, let's just copy paste that. And just as long as it's under this line. So let's just move it directly under. Okay, there we go. Now that should be fine. Okay, so now the last thing is we just want to set up jump trigger so that this is also responsive to your actual inputs as you're moving your character around. So that's So that's going to be a lot more simple. So because the script already detects whether you have the input for the jump or not, we just need to add one extra line here. So just do cAnimator dot set trigger, and then the name of the trigger, which is jump trigger. Okay, your script should now be set up, and we should be able to test this. So let's go to the game view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the animator window out just so you can also see how the states are flowing as you're playing the game. So let's just make some space. Okay, let's play. Okay, so right now you'll see that by default it is in the idle state, and the blue bar sort of indicates what state you're at. Once we move around, it switches from the idle to the walking animation. And again, the animation itself is a little bit finicky because of the whole bendy bone situation, but as long as you use the regular rig in Blender, your characters should be fine. And then if I were to press spacebar to jump, it plays the jump animation, and you can see how it sort of goes into the jump real quick and then returns back to movement. Now, right now it looks like the character is double jumping, but that's mostly because the animation's really messed up. But yeah, don't worry about it. The character is just jumping once. But yeah, so now you have a playable character who you can move around with an idle animation, a walking animation, and a jumping animation setup. And already, I mean, despite the fact that the animations themselves are kind of janky, your character feels very alive, and it feels like you're playing a real character, right? With depth and personality and just life to it. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on the Discord or on Canvas or by email, and I will try to help out as much as I can. All right, thank you guys. Bye.